Oh, hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So we're going to continue from where we left off, and now we're going to move over to chapter 3. And what we'll do today more or less will be to look at making these card operations in Go, also within our Go server. And then we will talk about authentication and authorization, more or less topics on a border around securing our application. And then we'll talk about session management, and then a little bit about password hashing, and of course error handling. So we'll try to go over all these topics in this video, and of course making it as interesting and of course as easy to understand as possible. And yeah, without further ado, let's jump right in. So initially we created this model, this user model, and we played a little bit with it, and we had first name, last name, email, ID created, and these other attributes. And I'm just going to make it a little bit simpler so we can work with it. And what I would do more or less, if you remember how we talked, what we said in our previous video, so more or less we can use this struct to map it to a table in our database, and then of course be able to ingest or consume data from that table and then easily map it to this struct. But what I've already gone ahead to do is to create a table that will represent our user. So with that, having done that, what I'll try to do more or less is now interact with this table right here in the code. So I'm going to add a few attributes to this, so we'll be able to serialize and deserialize this more or less. And so I will call this first name. I think that's what I call it in the database. And here as well, this was stored as last name like this, and then I have email, and of course I have ID. I can actually get rid of this GOM part. I don't need it anymore because I'm just going to access this data. And then I didn't added created ads, so I'm just also going to add that quickly. So JSON, I think I wrote it like this, created ads, and then I took out these two. I didn't need this anyways. So this is what we have right now in the database, and what we'll try to do is to perform quick operations, and those operations would be quite straightforward. So we'd have we already have a couple of things set up. So we have get by ID, and then by a couple of IDs. And what else? So now I can actually take out one of these because again this is more or less a duplication and it's actually not doing so much for now, but that's fine. So we have create, so we need update and delete, and we'll quickly add those now, and then try to make queries to our table using GOM or ORM, and then see how things work out. So what I can quickly do is to maybe add another get to I would more or less work with the one we have over here. So I'm just gonna make it like this. So instead of, I'll remove this ID, and no, I will leave the ID, and I'll pass an interface that will represent our user like this, and then this function will return a GOMDB, and then this would give us the more or less the option to still perform operations on what we get back from this function, and then of course access our user the way we would want to go about it. So just to remind you of what we did, we talked about scopes, and I'm just going to put this one here again because I mean it doesn't really do much for now, but I'll still just leave it in here. And so what is the issue here? Undefined DB. Yes, of course. So I'm just going to pass two things. I can actually just take out this ID because I already have user over here, and I can now have DB, which will be out of GOMDB like this. And is it conflicting? Mixed name. Yes, of course, user, sorry. And now, so what I would want to do more or less is just to return this. And then I'll show you how we can quickly use this. It's actually pretty straightforward. Shouldn't be difficult to work with. And then for delete, I'm really just gonna copy this again, put it in here for delete. And delete also is going to, I'll perform all the operations I need in here. So it's either gonna work out the way we want it to, or it's just gonna return an error. So I'm just gonna do it this way. So table, and I provide the table. And so when I have the table, again, I actually don't need my scopes anymore. So I can do unscoped, and then I delete, and then I provide our user, more or less. And what I can do is so this, we can handle the error here more or less if we want, or I can maybe, for now, I'll say return nil. We'll get back to this in a minute. And for updates, again, I'm just going to do something quite similar. So I can just copy this again, put it in here. And updates is again going to return an error. If we encounter one, and a nil, of course, if everything goes as expected. So I'll just say return db, that's table. I mean, we already know the table, but I can also provide it this way. And I have the table, and what I can do is I can just do updates, and then I provide this user, and then of course I can provide this error, and I can actually just do same here. There's no need. And here I provide this error, and I can now get rid of this. Pretty straightforward. So we have update, delete, gets, and a couple other gets implementations we have over here. And of course, like we said, I have to check out to branch security. So I'll check out to security, if I can spell it correctly. So we are now currently on branch security, and just so we keep records like we discussed initially. So what I'm going to do now is to define over here for user. I'm just going to define methods that's going to help us do all of this. So we already have create user, delete user. I'm going to add another one for update, and I'll add another one for get. And yep, and pretty straightforward like this. So it should be package users, actually not user, but it's fine. So now what we can do is more or less copy this and put it in all of these places, and then we modify it. So here would be get handler, update would be updates handler, and then we can, again, if you remember, go to our API, our users, and then we hook this up here. So we have group.get, we provide the path. So this would be at we'll go to /user, and maybe I'll just simply again say maybe get, something like this. And now of course users.get handler. And then the next thing of course would be update yes, of course, put, and we come on. So I can say maybe a user /update and update handler like this. And maybe what I can do again is, if we go here, because we have ones where we can get by ID, so I can create another one. I can say get by ID .go, and I'm going to paste this again, and I'll call this get come on by ID, and then we go over to our users, and then we actually duplicate this one, and we'll now have get, and again we'll provide a path param ID, and so we can again change this get by ID handler more or less. And now what we can do, we can start with this one, create handler. So already we talked about how to validate our payload, and here we instantiate a database, and of course we do a create. So what we can actually do is, if everything goes as expected, we will try to use this method to create our user. And what I can do is maybe more or less, if we go to our user, if we go to our models and go to this user, so these are created at is of type time.time. So what we can also quickly do is maybe go into the payload where we are creating the user and modify this. So over here I can actually say request that created at, and then I'll maybe make this time.now, and that should be fine. And again I have to verify if this is actually the type of this created at on the database, if it is a string or actually but I can quickly verify that. So everything looks to be okay, as this is of type time. And what can I do to make this of date time? So okay, I can let's work with this for now. So I can take this up a little bit. So we can start our server, go run main.go, and then we can actually go to our file, the one we had over here. So now we see all our endpoints actually up. Actually what I can do is to come back here and change this to 1. So this will be our version 1. There's really no, we don't have a version 1 yet, so there's no need to go to version 2. No. Okay, so now we are back to version 1 and we have our endpoint here. So what I can do is to come here and then create a new request for our create method, and I will have to label this appropriately. I'll say create user to be a post, and I need to add a lot of things, a couple of things in the header. Content type will be application JSON, and I can provide my payload like this. So I maybe put this on the side so I can see what I'm typing actually. And I come back here. So we have first name. First name is Tony. And last name. Last name, I'm just gonna say 18. And I come to email. And here I say okay, and what else? ID actually don't need to. So what I can do also is if I come to create, so if we go to user, so this ID is actually a string, and I would like this to be of type unique ID. So I would like to generate a UUID and do exactly what we did for so if we go over to create, what we did for the created at, so here I would like to provide for the ID, so it doesn't have to be provided in the request, and this would come from UUID. That's UUID, I think, which maybe is one UUID, and this should come from the Google package, which I don't think I have installed. And okay, I think I have it. Yes, no, I don't think so. I can start my server, go mod tidy, and so now I don't think that is this method, so I go back and I say new, maybe this one, exactly. So this is actually what I need. I can start our server again, main.go. and hopefully our server comes up again, which it seems it has. So now we come back to our file that we are editing, and now we actually don't need to provide this ID, and now we can send our request. And of course it says 404 not found, because we have to, this should be of user. If we go here, it is our post is user/create. So if we go back to our HTTP file, we have user/create, and we send our request again, and we have some errors which I'll try to fix. So apparently this is still exactly as it were yesterday where we left off, and these parameters were actually not provided. So what I'm gonna do quickly is just provide this, and of course I will do this off the camera so I don't compromise my credentials. So I'll do that quickly, and then we can try it once again. So I've gone ahead to provide the credentials that we need to connect to the database, and of course I'm not going to show that in the video so I don't compromise the credentials themselves. But one thing I realized was that the database I set up, that is created as, was actually set up as a string and not as a datetime. So I've actually come over here to change it. And now, so if we go back to our create function, of course, one thing I also noticed is that this should actually return at this point. We don't want to let the call out. If we count an error here, we should just terminate and return to the user. And yeah, so again, we are providing the created ad here as a string. Of course, I'm using the local time, so it's going to be unique to the user depending on where the user is trying to use our application from. And yes, of course, we are providing a unique ID. And now we can start our application one more time and test it out to see if everything works. And yeah, so I can go back to our HTTP file, and then I send the request. And now you see we actually get a success because this actually successfully wrote into our database. So if we go back to this method, I bring this over here, I close up this one actually. So if we go back to create, you would see from the way we structured our code, every logic regarding to writing our database is actually just here. And then if we look at the create method, this is actually all we need to write into our database. All of this actually just error handling. This additional 3 lines you see over here. So it's actually as easy and straightforward as that. So, but to verify that we actually wrote to the database, if you don't believe what we get over here, what we can do actually is to already, maybe I also need to, yes, I need to add a new file here, and I can call this get all. Go. So more or less we'll use this to fetch everything in our database. And so I can, of course, like we do, change the name to get all like this. And then again, we need to I need to go back to our API and go to users, and then I can copy this one and put it here. Maybe I just put it above, and I say /get/ maybe all, just playing around for now. So we can set get all handler, and now we restart our server. So what we would want to do more or less is to go back to our user, and where we have this get, we can actually use this method to get everything, and we can just try that out now to see if everything behaves as it should. And what I can actually do is, of course, maybe here I need to specify the table just to be on the safe side. So I specify the table like this, and then I go to get all. So the only part we would want to change is this part, so we can do something like get. So this text it gets, and maybe what I can quickly do is to I'm gonna clean this up later, but let's get it working first. So we can have a new function here where we say get all, And then here I would not just have one, I have user, I would have one array of users, and then I don't need this scope. Actually, I can actually get rid of this scope. Is fine. It's fine. So I go to our get all method, and here I can create our users, which is going to be of type slice of users. And yeah, of course, this should be from models.user. And then we can provide, and actually I don't need to provide this user, yes, because I'm not even using this here. Oh, crazy. So here I can just not enough, blah blah blah. So I will use our new function called get all, and now what I can do here is I can say find, and I'll provide these users, and this is going to map all the users that our results query returns to this variable that we created over here. And what is the error? So here we have to look at the error, of course. So if we get an error, it's going to return back, it's going to terminate here, and then of course if everything is fine, then here of course I would want to return my users. So I'll say users, and here I'll just pass users like this. So moment of truth, let's see if this actually works. So what we can actually do now is to make a request. We can just copy what we had over here in our request file, and then I can just call this get users, and we change this to a get, and we remove the body because we don't need to provide any body, and we said users slash get, we said slash all, something like this. And now we can actually start our server and then see if everything works as expected. This is taking longer than expected. Why is that? Okay, now our server is up, so we can test our request. So get users, and we get an error, invalid payload provided. So if we go to get all, oh, this is where the error is coming from. And of course, we are not actually expecting any payload to come from this request. So we can actually just get rid of this part. There is nothing to validate. And we can also get rid of this once we don't need it. So it should be fine like this. There's really nothing we validate. This is just a get. So go away. Okay, and I can just restart the server one more time and hope for the best. It should be fine now. So we go get, and boom, we get our results. Of course, that's what we are expected to get back here. We say status success, and then users this. And of course, if you don't want to, this is one way that it helps me more or less to add metadata to the response that is being returned from the server. But of course, if you don't want all of this, you can maybe just actually do something like this, and this should still be fine. So but normally I do it this way, again, just so I can provide a lot of metadata. If in places where I need to paginate, I can tell you like what's returned, what's left, and stuff like that. So but of course, like I said, you don't have to. If you just want to return this part, then it's also totally fine. If we go back to our HTTP file here and make our request, we only get this part. Like whatever you would want to do, but personally I would more or less do it like this to again help me provide metadata to the response coming back from the database or from the backend. Okay, so we have our get and create out of the way. So what we try to do now is to get by ID, and of course, because of the error we ran into the other time, we can actually just get rid of this part because we don't use a get and we don't need to modify the request. And what you can simply actually just do is to copy what we did for this one. When it comes to this query, it's actually going to be a lot similar to this, but yeah, you will see. So what we can do, of course, we can't use this same method, so but it's going to be quite similar. So I'm just going to copy this part and put it here, and I'm also gonna need to have what I'm gonna map my result to, but again, it's just gonna be one item and not gonna be an array. So here I just call this user. And of course, one thing I would need that this request gives me is of course the ID. So I'll call this ID, and we'll get this from the path parameters, and I call this ID. What is the error? No, of course not param, so but param. And here I can actually validate this. I say if ID is equal to an empty string, and now we can again return something like this to the user, and we say pretty straightforward. Here we can just simply say something quite generic. I can say something like, okay, requests missing user ID, something like this. That's totally fine. And now here I would like to use so over here I can actually open my user model. So we don't need to create, we don't need to update for now, we don't need get. Actually this one I can get rid of, or I can actually rename it. I can get rid of it, it's fine for now. And get by ID, so we provide an ID. This ID is coming from the user ID, and we say a first. So here, yes, we map this again. So what we can do here actually is to come in here and we say now var.id. So rec request.id, and we set this ID, the ID that the user provided. And now we can say get by ID, and we actually don't need to provide this one anymore. And what is the problem? This is not needed. Get by ID. That's error. So well, one quick thing we can actually do would be maybe we modify our get by ID in such a way that we take this from here, and so instead of returning the function, we simply just return this, and we can take this one out. It's not necessary anymore, it's fine. And here we can just provide the DB, and this should be fine. And we actually don't need to instantiate this anymore because we are using the request that we provided this way. And also get by ID, we just provide the ID which comes here, uses the table, and then pass the ID that we provided. And maybe what I can do because of SQL is I provide strings around this guy, so I can remove this one, do it like this, like this, and now I can provide double quotes around the ID that will be provided. And so let's give it a try and then see what's gonna happen. But one thing I would want to show you, of course, is this. So when it comes to gets, there are two ways we can actually do this. The reason I'm putting these quotes here is if I pass like a raw string here, if I have like a raw string like this, if I'm passing this here, and when this is stored in the database using this ORM, more or less what happens is that there are double quotes around the string. So in the end, what you get is something like this. Something like this. So that is why if I have to query this by providing a raw string, I can actually just wrap this way. But of course, if I don't want to do this, I can. One thing I would also want to show you is more or less this structs that we have here. So one way, of course, if you see over here, we have this query. I will say where ID is equal to this, more or less fetching by this ID. If we also do not want to provide this way, we can actually get rid of this completely. And what would happen is that we will provide this value in the struct. That way we would not have to care about double quotes or whatever, and we can just put that in the struct. And if we come back here, more or less, if you see what we did over here, this is exactly the same as doing this where. So you can already tell this is a shorthand, but the nice thing is, of course, if you can get the option to write raw queries, you have more flexibility, you can play around, but of course, if you want to use the GOM, the ORM, then you have to, of course, master the APIs and everything. And yeah, but the point is that here in this request, if for example over here we want to query where ID is equal to this and email equal to this, all we have to do is provide the email as well, and then it's going to query against these two values. So that's really what I want to share. If you want to query by ID, this is more than enough, and all the query you would need to write is this, right? So what we can of course do already is initially the first one we created, we had this ID, so we can actually copy it, but before then maybe I just duplicate this one again. So get users, and we can just call this get user, and we go to our API, we have this as users/get/id. so if we come back here, so user/get/ now we have to provide the ID, and I'm just going to copy this one. If I copy this ID and then I put it here, and then we send our request. So now we get record not found, and we will see why that is. Of course, we have to restart this server because now if you look over here, we are more or less doing this twice. So because we are providing, if we go to get by ID, because we provide this here, and initially we also had the where clause in the query, the actual query that was sent more or less to the SQL database. You see over here ID was specified twice, so it says here where ID is this, and again it says ID is this. So all I have to do, because I've gotten rid of it in one of the places, I don't want to have it in both places, I can restart the server this way, and then we can try one more time. So the server is up again, and we send our request one more time, and you see here we get our results back. And because of course we are providing this result here in the payload, again you decide what you want to do here, because you're getting just one item, we can just leave it as this. I think this should be fine. And so if we go back here again, we can send our requests, and it should just give us this user. That's totally fine. So again, we come back here, we have create, we have delete, which is not yet implemented. We have this get all, which is more or less using this method, and I can actually just change this to get, so it's fine. And then we need to go back to our get all and replace, of course, update this to get, so this is fine. So we have get by ID, which we just tested. We have get, and now I think this is duplicate. So I'm just gonna keep one actually, so I can copy everything in here. No, I don't need to rewrite the heading. I'm just gonna copy everything here and go to our gets. And so let's first get to our user API and see if this is actually being used. So get is a get handler. So if I come here, we have a get handler which is actually not being used. So I can just replace this, actually, it's fine. I can replace this like this. And then I can go back to, I can actually delete this one. I don't need it anymore. And then we can go to our API, and then I can actually delete this one. So we have our get, which just returns everything. So if we restart our server and then try to get all our users one more time, now we don't need to specify this anymore. And this is still fine. So for me, I more or less, the way I work is I try to get the solution I'm going for working, and then I can go for optimization. But so we will still optimize this, of course, going forward. But let's go with all the implementations we need to have. So I can again go to user. No, I go to get by ID, or maybe yes, I can go to get by ID, it's fine. And then I copy everything here, and then I go to delete, because I know delete again, you have to provide, okay, maybe I close up this windows because it's cluttering the whole place. So I can provide this here, because I know with this you have to provide an ID of the user you want to delete. Again, we try to get it this way. If it is not, then we say the payload is of course malformed. And this should not be actually internal server error. This should be bad request. So that is bad request. And then if I go to bad ID, it should still be bad request, like this. Okay, so if we go back to delete, we have our ID, and now what we need to implement more or less is a delete method, which is what we have here. So we can simply just copy this. We have this already here, and we can come to get by ID and provide this. And of course, I'm going to modify this again to, yes, this is fine. I don't need to provide this actually. I can get rid of this user. It's totally fine. And then delete. Now we only provide the DB. That's totally fine. So we have the error. So if this is the case, an error is not equal to nil. So this is already a string. Okay, so I can remove this way. And so 1 second. Yes, of course. So our delete is already returning the error. So this can actually stay here, so that in delete we can just get rid of this part. It's fine. So this should be fine. And now we can of course get the string this way. Totally fine. And yeah, that's more or less it. And now of course we can test this out. So this should be looking good. So we go back to our HTTP file, and I'm just going to copy this one again and put it here, and I call this of course delete user. And in the API definition, it's just user / delete and of course / ID. So we have the ID of course of the user we would want to delete. And over here we would have user / delete and then the ID. So I restart the server again to have our changes up to date. So now we can try to delete the user. I will send a request, and for 04 not found, of course this should be a delete. And then we send the request again. And now of course this worked, but the only issue is of course when this deleted, it returned the ID. So if I go back to this here, we actually don't need to return this anymore. So we can actually return a header like this, and then we say success, and we say maybe true, no, and then we can try this one more time. So I close this one out, and then of course this should no longer exist, but it should still be fine. So now if we go to get all users, it should now be empty, and of course we can add a user. Yes, and we can add a couple of them, add as many as we want, doesn't matter. And now we can get all users, and then we have a really long list. And then again we can copy this ID, put it here to get the specific user, this one, and we send the request, and of course it returns that user. And then we can also delete this user and send the requests, and it's successfully. So what we've done more or less is perform CRUD operation, our SQL, Microsoft SQL Server database using GOM ORM. And what we can now do of course is move on to the next things, which if you look over here, we have to touch up on authentication and authorization a little bit, and then session management, password hashing, and of course error handling. We try to cover these ones as quickly as possible.